Are you a beginner bassist? Yes? I'm Tom, I'm a professional teacher, and today I want to share my top 10 things that you can do immediately that will make you play and sound better. The number one thing on today's list is something that you could fix in the next 5 minutes, and the number 10 thing is something that you could start straight away, but it may be difficult to perfect. Number 10, play Billie Jean all the way through. I guess this is a bit of an unusual one. The bass line to Billie Jean by Michael Jackson is always on those lists of easiest bass lines, and it seems easy because it's pretty repetitive, but if you play it all the way through, it's actually really grueling and a real test of your endurance. And if you play through it today, it can really help you, firstly, get a good indication of where you are with your playing, and it also can help you strengthen your fretting hand for future playing. And as a tip, when you're playing the bass line, try as much as possible to pivot from your index finger. So hold it down here on the second fret of the D string. And that's going to get a much smoother result. Number 9, place your fingers correctly. Are you familiar with these sounds? Not getting your fretting fingers in exactly the right place or pulling them off too aggressively or sometimes not aggressively enough creates this buzzy noise, and it sounds a bit yuck. When we play, generally we want each note to be perfectly formed and not kind of tailing off with buzz. Some general tips: try and hold the note as close to the fret as possible, and you'll also need to hold down the notes with quite a bit of force. Holding it down with force may hurt your fingers in the short run, but after a while you develop the calluses which will toughen up your fingers. Number 8, don't ignore the rests. When you're learning the bass, beginners naturally focus on playing the right notes at the right time, so these ones here on the tab, but tend to ignore the rests between the notes, so you can see these symbols on tab. These symbols show how long the silence between the notes should last. And when I say silence, I mean absolute silence, no lingering notes. No tapping the strings, no fret buzz, just absolute pure silence. Because bass frequencies are so dominant, having the bass notes just linger around really makes a studio recording or a live recording sound muddy. So whatever you do, make sure that you cut off the sound of the bass during the rests. Number 7, push through the strings. To get a solid thumpy tone, push through the strings with your plucking hand. So you need to push through the string with quite a bit of force. So your fingers are like Bruce Lee's and they're punching through the strings. If you're doing it right, your plucking fingers should end up on the string above like this. And this is called a rest stroke. Now beginners will commonly play what's called free stroke, where after playing a note, the finger will end up in midair like this. And with this free stroke, the fingers don't push through the strings, so you can't get that kind of really thuddy tone. What about the E string? With notes on the E string, drive the finger into the lower part of the thumb, like this. And then you can get a nice confident tone on all strings. Number 6, show your work. The best way for you to improve is to show others your work. I know this is a very difficult thing for a lot of people, but I can't stress enough of how important it is to get feedback to really help you improve. And I would really recommend reading the book by Austin Kleon called Show Your Work. Today you could find a teacher and get professional feedback, which is by far the fastest way to progress. Alternatively, you could post your playing to a Reddit forum and request feedback. And the simple act of recording a full performance will make you place a far higher demand on yourself than if you're playing for no one. If you wanted to, you could post a video completely anonymously to YouTube, and if you weren't happy with it, you could just delete it. Or just show the video to close friends. There's lots of ways around this. In the past, personally, I've posted videos on YouTube that I wasn't happy with, like this one of Dua Lipa's Don't Start Now, which is now private. And even though it was for my little channel quite successful, for a number of reasons, it wasn't great. And I got some negative feedback. And it helped me more as a bassist than if I got 100% positive feedback. And people are overwhelmingly nice, so you're going to get a lot more encouragement than negativity anyway. If you're finding this video helpful, help me out with the algorithm by giving the video a like, and consider subscribing if you want more content like this. If you are a beginner, please let me know if there are any other topics that you would like covered in future videos in the comments section. Gracias. Number 5, hold the bass correctly. If you hold your bass correctly, it helps you play more freely and comfortably. There's basically a 2-step test that I've come up with over the years to see how well you're holding your bass. So step 1, drop your fretting hand. If the bass maintains its position without dropping, you're doing well. Now, if it drops, that means that your fretting hand is taking on too much weight and the bass is not being held comfortably enough with this structure with your body. Now, step 2, making sure that this part of your palm doesn't touch the bottom of the fretboard. Run your hand up. If you can kind of get all the way up to the top without anything stopping your hand, you're holding it in a good way. Now, if your body or your leg kind of blocks you on the way up, generally that means you're not kind of holding the bass at a good angle. If you're standing up using a strap, generally test number 2 is a little bit easier because your body generally gets into a bit of a better natural position. Now, ultimately, our goal when holding the bass is for this body structure to hold the bass so it props up like it's on a stand and your hand can move freely up and down the neck without being kind of blocked by anything. If you're sitting, one thing you can try is a footstool to help elevate the bass a little bit, and that's going to help it get into a better position to move around. Number 4, change your strings. Bass strings are expensive, but they can make a massive difference in the quality of sound that you can get from a bass. A new set can make a cheap bass sound good, or an old ratty set can make an expensive bass sound cheap. As a quick tip, make sure not to overwind your strings. See on this bass how there's lots of windings around the machine head. This will make it really difficult to keep the strings in tune. On this bass, you can see how there's only a few windings around the machine head. Now, this point is a bit complicated by flat wound strings, which bassists almost never change. But if you're using round wound strings, which are the most common type of strings, change them fairly regularly, as a new set will make your bass sound better immediately. Number 3, put the dials in the middle. It can be really daunting when you start about which settings to use on the bass and on the amp. As a general tip, play it safe and keep things in the middle. So on the amp, set the bass, middle, and treble to 12 o'clock. And on the bass, like this active bass, I've turned the volume all the way up, but my other EQ dials are all turned completely in the middle. On a passive bass like this jazz bass, keep all the dials in the middle. And that's a ukulele. Number 2, tune your bass. This bass is going to go out of tune a lot, so tune it at least once a day. And as a beginner, generally because your ear isn't super developed, it may be difficult to identify if it's out of tune, but others will be able to identify something is out of tune and can be quite unpleasant. Now, my tuner of choice is the Guitar Tuner app, which is free with its kind of basic functionality. Now, as a general tip, basic tuners don't tend to pick up the low E string very well. So what you can do is play the 5th fret of the E string, which is an A, bonus tip. As a bonus tip, plug the bass over the neck pickup. It's the best position for a general all-around sound. I find that beginners can stray a bit off target as they play the higher string, so like this. So get a bit of an uneven tone. So really try and keep your plucking fingers in a consistent space over the pickup. And the number 1 thing is cut your fingernails. The easiest thing that you can do right now is just to cut your fingernails on your plucking hand really short. We need bass notes to be deep and thuddy, but by having fingernails clipping the strings, it makes it hard to get a good, deep and sweet tone. Listen to this note being played with fingers which have short fingernails on them. Now listen to the same note being played with a finger which does have a long fingernail. Having fingernails also creates an inconsistent sound between your index and middle fingers of your plucking hand. Now, you don't have to go crazy with looking after your nails, but a little bit of maintenance goes a long way. That's my list. A big thanks to all my Patreons for making today's list possible, and an extra big thanks to my VIP patron.